Okay, hello friends out there in YouTube land. This is Michael Wilson Barber's little YouTube channel. We are not sponsored by the St. Louis Blues. We are sponsored by Skookum Merch. That's SKOOKUM merch.com, where I've made t-shirts and sell them. This is a quick review. I'm going to try to make it quick, of the 4 Kiss solo albums, and I have them here in my hands on CD. And man, I should have done this video a long time ago, and maybe later I'll do individual reviews, but this is intended to be a review of ranking the 4 Kiss solo albums. You wanted the best, you got the best. The hottest band in the world at one time, Kiss. Okay, so number 4, the worst Kiss solo album, Peter Criss. Man, this is a hard album to listen to. It's hard to even get through the first side. It's hard to get through the second side. I think I've only listened to this entire album maybe 2 or 3 times in my whole life, and I'm gonna be 53. So if I had to pick 2 of my favorite songs off of this album, which is not a rock and roll album, I don't know, man. It's Tossin' and Turnin', which is a cover version, and that's the kind of Sugar Papa likes, which may also be a cover version. I don't even know if Peter wrote half of these songs or not. It's co-produced by Vinnie Poncia, or at least Vinnie Poncia is the producer, and I guess Peter is involved some. Man, just not a good album, not a good rock and roll album. I don't know, man. It's a stinker. Coming in at number 2 is Gene Simmons' solo album. And there will be some of you that definitely will like this album the most, just because Gene. If I had to pick 2 songs, I'd say Radioactive and Living in Sin at the Holiday Inn. I do kind of like his When You Wish Upon a Star by Jiminy Cricket in Pinocchio. This is co-produced by Gene and Sean Delaney. So it's not a rock and roll album. There are a few rock and roll songs on this album, but it's an eclectic blend of like 70s funk, some other types of music, not rock and roll, like pop music. And Gene does not play bass on this, although he's a bass player for Kiss. He plays guitars. And Gene got a lot of people involved with this album, like Bob Seger's on here. One of the guitarists for Cheap Trick is on here. Cher, Helen Reddy is on here, and who else? Joe Perry from Aerosmith, and Katie Segal is a backup singer on this album, and she later became the famous mother in Married with Children. So yeah, it's way better than Peter's. I'm sorry, Peter, brother, I love you, man, but anyway, Gene's number 2. Number 3 is Paul Stanley's album, co-produced by Paul Stanley and a guy named Jeff Glicksman, who is also the producer for Kansas. And some of these songs actually sound kind of like Kansas, with like guitars on top of guitars, like sound being placed on top of sound. Paul, this is a really good album. If you guys are listening out there in YouTube at land, this is a good album, and I would say it is a rock and roll album, unlike Peter's and Gene's. But it's hard to pick just 2 songs. Off the top of my head, I would just say Tonight You Belong to Me and Wouldn't You Like to Know Me, Take Me Away, Together as One. I mean, this is a good rock and roll album. So I give Paul a number 2 in the solo albums. And predictably, everybody knows that Ace Frehley's solo album is the best of the 4. It sold the most probably, although Kiss says each one sold a million copies. I don't ever remember seeing this one in the cut record bin, you know, for 99 cents. This was a good album. It even had a hit on the radio, New York Groove, which is still played today on the radio. And it's produced by Eddie Kramer. So Ace really pulled one off with this one, man. He got Eddie Kramer to produce his solo album. And he rocked. He got Anton Fig to play the drums. And Ace played almost everything else. He played all the guitars, bass, I think, on most songs. And singing, of course. And Anton Fig played the drums. The David Letterman drummer. Good album, man. It's hard to pick two songs. I would just say New York Groove, of course. I'm in Need of Love. Snowblind. I mean, Speeding Back to My Baby. It is a rock and roll album from 1978. This is like a time capsule. You could bury this in a 1978 time capsule and unbury it 500 years from now, and you would say, man, that sounds like rock and roll from 1978, just the way it's supposed to sound. So Eddie Kramer also produced Love Gun and I think Rock and Roll Over. This album would rank probably in the top 10 of all Kiss albums. And then maybe that's another video for another day, but by itself, it's a great Kiss album. Okay, so that's my review. Peters, it's a stinker. Jeans has some stinky songs on it, but also some rock and roll songs, but it's not really a rock and roll album. Paul's is a rock and roll album, and it's very good, so I'll give Paul number 2. And then Ace, of course, is number 1. Best solo album of the 4. So everyone out there in YouTube land, have a good day. And that's a little bit of Kisstory. God bless and goodbye.